Hello, welcome back to Unbelievable with me, your host, Andy Kind. Today we are at a school in Aylesbury. I've been joined by two epic guests. To my right, we have Dr Joshua Sijuwade, who is a philosopher at the University of Birmingham. Great to have you back on the show.
Thank you.
And to my left, we have Julius Weinberg, medic, all-round good egg, and trustee of the National Secular Society. And today we are looking at the sanity of belief. Is belief in God reasonable or rational? I'd like to start, I've asked this before when we've done this sort of topic, but I'll ask you, Joshua, because people might become confused between reasonable and rational. Could you, in a nutshell, describe what it means to you to be reasonable as opposed to rational, or do we really mean them in layman's terms as the same thing?
Well, for a belief to be reasonable, you're just saying that there are reasons for it.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not just believing something without reasons. Rationality is a little bit more detailed and precise in the way that you interpret it, because there are different ways of being rational. So you can be pragmatically rational. That means you do things based upon the sort of outcome that you'll have practically. But then the one that we're really caring about is something called epistemic rationality. That is, and I go with the evidentialist point of view, which is the idea that a belief or a disbelief is rational if it is proportionate to the evidence. Mm-hmm. So that means that basically a belief is a attitude that you have towards a claim, and you are rational in holding to that claim if there is evidence in support of that specific belief. So if I believe that it's raining, I'm rational in believing it's raining if I've seen the rain, from my window. I've seen people holding umbrellas, but I'm not rational to sort of believe that it's not raining because I've have evidence in front of me that's sort of supporting that belief. So the key thing I want to say at this point is that rationality is to do with, from the evidentialist point of view, it is about proportion to the evidence. Mm-hmm. So if you have a belief, then you should only believe it if it's a rational belief, if you have evidence in support of that specific belief.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. And you've got fantastic biceps.
Oh. Thank you for that.
Julius, less good biceps, but still a good-looking man.
Hopeless biceps.
Now, we'll go straight in with it then. Do you think that it is rational to hold a belief in a God?
Thank you, Josh. That was a great opener and a really good description of what it means to be rational. I guess from a philosophical point of view, I'm not a philosopher. I'm a medic by background and did education. I'm what's called a fallibilist. So I think that there are very few things that you can prove. And therefore, usually, except on pragmatic grounds, you should not hold any belief. Because what we are, so Homo sapiens, knowing man, I don't think that's wrong. I think actually what we're seeking is explanations. We're seeking good explanation. So as we look at the world, I think we should be looking for the best possible explanations for things. And as a scientist, accepting our explanations are almost certainly wrong. And therefore, our epistemic position should be to question and not believe, because we're almost certainly wrong in our position. It may be the best available explanation. So, why did that happen? Gravity. Well, before Newton, people thought, Aristotle, that it was seeking to find the ground, or that God decided. Newton came along with an explanation that not only explained why this fell to ground, but also a whole lot of other things. Good explanations have reach. So an explanation that explained why the Earth went round the sun, the moon went round the Earth, there were tides, ballistics. So a great explanation, but it was wrong. Einstein improved it. And we know that Einstein's explanation of gravity using space-time distortions is wrong. And so we're now seeking a better explanation. So my epistemic, great word, I need something to drink, position is that we should not believe. We should take a position of doubt in almost every position, particularly those actually where people resort to belief through religion.
That's a very well-rounded answer. But for you then, does that put us in a position where we go about our lives not really being able to believe anything about anything. Presumably, you do think there are some things that we can drill down in.
I think that you have to ask how good is the explanation, and there are some, you have to get on with life. So we accept certain things, but actually I think we should always be in a position of being willing to interrogate those. So yeah, of course, we have to get on with life. I have to believe that the train is going to arrive. But if the train doesn't arrive, I then have to have an alternative explanation for life. So by and large, the fallback position is one of questioning and rigorous questioning.
So questioning neutrality.
Questioning neutrality. But with the assumption, I think this is where I really speak here as a humanist, right? The secular society, actually, secularism is not anti-religious. Secularism is anti-religious privilege. There are lots of religious secularists. But my position here is to say, question, and if you look at the link, so belief systems are fundamentally based on being right. There's a book, there's a code. Humanism is allied science. It's fundamentally based on being wrong. Popper, it's saying we want to show that this is wrong, because you can never prove something right. So we should always take the epistemic position of Popper, of fallibilism, of looking for proof, not of accepting correctness.
Thanks very much. Josh, do you think that there are, I mean, that's a very easily defensible viewpoint, isn't it? Because actually you allow yourself to be open to truth without having to overcommit and then being proven wrong. So I think actually that's a very good starting point. Do you find problems with this fallibilism?
Yes, I do.
Oh, right.
A lot of problems. So firstly, I think you have, if I'm being honest, I think you have too strong of a view of what belief is. A belief is just a view, it's a mental attitude. It's a doxastic attitude, a mental attitude you have towards a claim, towards a proposition. So for example, this black device is in front of me. I believe it is just saying that I have an attitude towards it being true, that it is in front of me. When you disbelieve something, you have the attitude that the statement that you're reflecting on is false. So belief is just something where you have a mental attitude. Knowledge is where it's normally a little bit more difficult to get actually what we mean by knowledge. And so the position that you take of sort of just suspending judgment, you only suspend judgment if we're going with an evidentialist point of view, if your total evidence is either balanced or you just have a inconclusive set of data or inconclusive amount of evidence. So unless you've done a very, I would say, tall task of investigating all the claims about all the things that you believe, then you shouldn't go to a position of suspending judgment. Suspending judgment is only when you've looked at all the evidence you looked at all the evidence against, you say, ooh, they're equally weighted, so I shouldn't believe it because the evidence doesn't lead me to take it to be true. Or you just believe that it's inconclusive. So actually belief is something which you can easily have. And that's why we can have a lot of false beliefs. Knowledge is something which is slightly a little bit more difficult to have. And we have a lot of philosophers who debate about what is the nature of knowledge. But I think you just have too much of a strong view. You're sort of equating belief with certainty. You can still believe something, but doubt. So belief, when you believe something a lot of the time, you're just saying that it's more true than its negation. So when I say that I believe that this table is in front of me, all I'm saying is that the evidence seems to indicate that the table is in front of me more than it not being in front of me. Or let's go with the existence of God. If someone believes in God, all they're saying is that the evidence seems to indicate that there is a God more so than that there is no God. And so, again, I think that you made a false identification of certainty with belief, because I think you can believe and you can believe easily, and you can also believe with doubt. Doubt is not mutually exclusive when it comes to belief as well.
Well, we're already into fourth gear here. This
Can
is
I-
very good. Of course, please.
I disagree. I accept some of that.
You're here to
Yeah,
disagree.
I think that, firstly, one can take a probabilistic view of the world and of evidence. And in particular, and I don't want to go into, we can get into a lot of technicality, I don't want to default to a discussion of linguistic philosophy, which is never very helpful. So I think you can take a probabilistic view, and absolutely, there are some things you have to be probabilistic about. It is likely that, and in order to live in the real world, I will accept that that is the case. Yeah, I think this table is here. I'm not going to be an idealist to the extent that I deny the existence of the world around me. I think we have to take a pragmatic view. However, I think that when you get into questions of belief, and I think this is fundamentally about things like about belief in God, I think it trivializes to start talking about belief in whether the table is there. So we could talk about Bayesian statistics. We could talk about probability. So I think actually the fallibilist position is perfectly clear on that. And most philosophers are fallibilists now. And they say actually it's quite difficult, even to go all the way back to Plato, to actually make claims about the real world. But we have to make pragmatic claims. So I think we're down to the grounds of saying a pragmatic claim, is there a God or not? So I'd like to ask Josh a question. Because I noticed that this is about God with a capital G. There are lots of gods. I was talking about Neil Gaiman earlier on. There are Norse gods, there are Egyptian gods. So not only can we ask about belief, but which God? Because Josh's position ultimately is that what he's actually believing in is his own very personal God, which is fine. We can all have our own very personal beliefs. Some people believe that Manchester United is a great football club. That's fine, but it doesn't have epistemic breadth.
It's not true, is it?
And it's not true.
It's not true. Oh, well.
I just asking the question, which God?
Yeah.
What is the claim?
Yeah, so
I'm not sure what the claim
Julius
is.
is asking you a question, and it is about God. It's about the rationality, the sanity of belief in God. And we can do little g, big G, however you fancy answering that, Josh.
Yeah. I mean, I feel it's sort of a ruse, this question, because someone who studies philosophy of religion, you would say that there's sort of a convergence in something called perfect being theology, which is the idea that we have sort of a general working understanding of what God is. God is a fundamental, perfectly good, omnipotent, omniscient being. Okay, those are normally the attributes you'll take. Fundamentality, maybe necessity, omnipotence, omniscience, perfect goodness, eternality, and you can add a few more things to that.
Can I ask, is this... Anselm talked about God as the greatest conceivable being, didn't he?
So, I mean, that's... Anselm is famous for arguing for that, for the existence of that being from an a priori standpoint. But basically saying that we don't need to have any observational data to be able to believe in this being. We can just rationalize it from the nature of the concept itself. The nature of a maximally great being, or that than which nothing greater could be conceived, must be one that has existence. Now, I'm not defending that position. What I'm saying is that there seems to be a convergence in philosophy of religion, which is the area in which we study about the existence of God, that there is an understanding that God is to be understood as a fundamental divine being, and that means that he's all omnipotent, omniscient, perfectly good, eternal, necessary. So what you're doing is that you're moving into what would be called revealed theology, which is the idea of, okay, what's the name of this God? Are we saying that God is the Father in Christianity, or is he Allah, or is he Brahman, or is he something else? That is not sort of the conversation that is to be had. Well, we're asking about, is it rational to believe in a single, fundamental, omnipotent, omniscient, perfectly good being? And that's the argument I'm going to be sort of putting forward. But I think it's a different question to say, well, when does that being reveal himself? And then who does he reveal himself as? That's a secondary question, which I think is something different for our conversation.
I'm having such a lovely time. Over to you, Julius.
I think that's really helpful, and I think thank you. I think that does define it, and I think that's a sensible area to talk about rather than whether the table exists or not. Okay, so, and I think those are really interesting questions, which I think are very difficult. So let's go for the heart, what I think is the heart of the matter, or one of the hearts of the matter, which is the old question of theodicy, which is, okay, so if there is this omnipotent, omniscient being who created the world, why is there evil? Is there harm? Is there pain? Why do innocent people die in pain? Children. Why do animals end up dying in agony and pain? Why, unless you don't believe in evolution, which would be another discussion, why have 99% of all species that ever evolved become extinct? Now, why does this omnipotent, omniscient, perfectly good God allow these things to happen? And I don't think rationally it's simply an answer to say, oh, we don't understand that. It's beyond us, which is the normal answer that's given, because that is not a rational answer. That's a kicking the can down the road. I mean, if you, as students in this school, had a teacher, when you asked them a question and they couldn't answer, so, oh, well, it's because the head teacher said so, you wouldn't think that that was a very good answer, would you? So I guess let's tangle with the question of, why is there evil? Why is there pain of people who are clearly innocent with this perfectly good, omnipotent, omniscient, I desperately need a drink. God.
So we've gone very quickly to the crux of the matter, the one that always comes up, which is suffering. And Stephen Law talked about predation with animals, and it is. I mean, I always think that there's only one really good argument against Christianity, and that is gratuitous suffering. So we've established which God we're talking about now, and Julius has said, okay, but why so much harm? It's not just that bad things happen, but so many bad things happen to so many different people and species. So,
Yeah,
Josh?
Okay, so I defend what's called the Exemplar Theodicy, so that's my own personal theodicy that I've written on. And the answer is that God allows suffering for two reasons. First reason is to allow individuals, that is humans and animals, to transform into moral exemplars. And then the second reason is that if a human or animal cannot themselves transform into a moral exemplar, then their suffering, their experience of suffering, provides other humans, animals, to transform into exemplars. So you have two sort of ways that you take this. Either it allows the human or animal to transform into an exemplar of morality, or it provides others with the opportunity to transform into exemplars of morality.
So it allows for moral growth, is that?
Well, it's a little bit more than that. So
it's more than that.
a moral exemplar is, and it's very nuanced, but the key idea is that there are two things. A moral exemplar is one that grounds morality in that we know what morality is from that individual, and it also spreads goodness around its specific context.
Mm-hmm.
So if we look to our society, we have many exemplars that we point to and say, that's what it means to be good. For example, if you're a Christian, you might look to the person of Jesus and say, that's what it means to be good. That's what it means to be kind, to be loving, to be patient, to be gentle. If you're a Muslim, it might be the Prophet Muhammad. Whoever it is, secular as well, you have certain exemplars that you look to and say, that's what it is. That's an admirable person. That's an ideal form of goodness. Mm-hmm. And so moral exemplars are ones that ground morality within their specific context. But they also spread morality or goodness around their context through their living and their teaching. Mm-hmm. And so when I look to an exemplar, I want to become like that being. So I'll give you just a sort of a mundane example. So Cristiano Ronaldo, I know there's debate with Messi, Ronaldo. So if you're a big football player and you look to Ronaldo as an exemplar, you're not just going to say, oh, I want to be like Ronaldo, and you're just going to go on eating at McDonald's or KFC. You're going to actually try and model your life like him. You're going to try and maybe, do the training that he does, eat the food regime that he goes through in the training regime. So there are many things that you'll do that you'll try to emulate to be able to be like that specific exemplar. Mm-hmm. Now, it's the same thing with morality as well. Morality isn't just something that we look to people who are good, but when we also want to become good, we admire them and we seek to emulate them. And so through looking at exemplars, we also can emulate their behaviors, and we can then over time become exemplars ourselves. So what I'm saying to you here is that suffering is the means by which an individual, that is a human and animal, can transform into an exemplar. You cannot transform into an exemplar, one that grounds morality and spreads goodness around the world, without undergoing suffering. But then let's say that human or animal doesn't have the possibility to become an exemplar. Maybe their life is cut short. Then through their own suffering experience, they provide others with the opportunity in response to them to transform into an exemplar. Mm-hmm. So the reason why God allows it is because he wants us as humans and also as animals that are living in the world, to be co-creators of goodness in his world. God doesn't just say, this world is good and I'm going to make everything in this world the way I want. God creates the world physically, but we have a role to transform the world axiologically. So instead of saying God is going to say, I'm just going to make everyone a robot, and he's going to make the world physically, and he's going to put all the moral laws in our minds, and we're just going to live the way that he wants. He could do that. But actually, what is of more value is that we are able to participate in God's creative role by making the world into a good world, by becoming exemplars and spreading goodness around the world by our exemplarity. And this could be the same thing in the school. If you're in a school environment and you live as a good person, other people want to emulate you, and you can change your environment into a good environment. God wants you to do that. But in order to do that, you need to be able to go through suffering to allow you to become an exemplar or provide others with the opportunity to do so. Absolutely. And this extends, extends to humans and animals.
Absolutely fantastic. I suspect you've got a lot to say to that, Julius.
I find that profoundly unpleasant doctrine, actually. Profoundly unpleasant. Because it's saying that there's something sort of atavistic pleasure in developing suffering. So you've got this God out there who could create any world they wanted. They could create a world where everyone was good. This is an omniscient, perfectly good God. Not my definition, Josh's. Could create any world they want. A world that none of us can imagine. A way of thinking that none of us can imagine, where everyone is good and happy, but chooses to create a world, one, where they're suffering, two, then this bizarre idea that the suffering is really good for us. Oh, yeah. And finally, treats people as means, not ends. Nice bit of standard philosophy here. Okay, if you're not good enough to be good, but actually your suffering then makes other people good, that's treating people as means, not ends, and animals as means, not ends, and tiny children as means, not ends. I find this a profoundly unpleasant bit of doctrine, to be honest. And then, this idea. So let's go back to the analogy of the school. So how do you make a school great? You don't make a school great by making people suffer so that they can be better. You make a school great by having a wonderful culture so nobody suffers from the minute they come into it. It's a great school with a great culture where everyone's supported from the first year they walk into it and everyone behaves well. You don't deliberately design a school so there's a little bit of suffering out there so everyone can see, oh, that person suffered and came better. That is nasty. That's what I find actually quite a lot of this theology is very anti-people. It's the idea of suffering. This is a religion based on a human sacrifice, isn't it? And that's what we have. It's really quite primitive. It's human sacrifice. It's suffering will make you better. So put up with it, guys. Or actually, if you can't put up with it, it'll make it better for someone else. I find the whole thing absolutely irrational because it's and doesn't clearly make sense of this perfectly good God. Perfectly good God could have created a very different world with very different rewards and outcomes, so there was none of this suffering. The only way of explaining it is there ain't no perfectly good God.
Wow, mic drop moment, Julius.
Can I come?
Of course, that's what you're here for, Josh.
Okay, so then maybe I'll ask Sir over there to, instead of getting the students to study, to revise for their exams, he's going to give them all of the answers. Because it's suffering to study, isn't it? It's a little bit of tension, a little bit of stress. I mean, I think all of the people here will love that. If Sir comes in the next morning and says, hey guys, don't worry about studying, don't worry about revising, because that's a little bit of challenge, that is suffering. And so actually, I'm going to give you all the answers. No, we see suffering as actually being something which generates good. Suffering in and of itself is intrinsically bad. I've never said that it was intrinsically good. But what it can produce a greater good. So me, by studying, for example, it is intrinsically bad, waking up maybe at 2 a.m. and having to have a Monster or Red Bull, if you're allowed them, and trying to power through and get through my history textbook to get my essay written. That is a bit of suffering. And I'll define what suffering is. Suffering is a negative experience that you want to seize. So that is a negative experience that I want to seize. And so we would say that actually, no, suffering is something which generates good. And so we wouldn't shut down schools because we'll say, actually, we can just give them all the answers from the beginning. No, we believe that them developing as students is a good thing, even though they have to go through suffering. So I think you have a misunderstanding of what I'm saying here. I'm saying that suffering produces a greater good. This is a greater good defense.
I don't misunderstand that. I accept that. And I think there's a real world where there's suffering. And I think there are good reasons why there's suffering. What you don't seem to understand, this perfect God could have created a world where there was no suffering. Why not?
That's the exact answer that I gave you.
No, but you haven't given me an answer because your answer is that suffering produces a good. But the God could have created a world where there was no suffering because the world was good.
But would you have that good? Would you have that?
You're limiting God, aren't you? You're saying you've got a limited God who can only produce good through suffering. I'm not limiting God. So you don't seem to be able to conceptualize a completely different sort of world I'm saying God is great. God could have produced any world possible, one that I can't imagine, where people were happy, the world was wonderful, but there was no suffering. Now, if you believe in a perfectly good, omnipotent, omniscient God, you have to believe that that is possible. So my simple question is, either that isn't possible or God has chosen not to do it. And therefore, God revels in suffering.
Okay, can I be courageous
Sure.
in a perfect world?
Sure.
Can I be courageous in a perfect world?
those words become irrelevant.
No, you're not
They
answering my
become
question.
irrelevant.
My question was, can I be courageous in a perfect world?
This is not my world. This is the world that what
In a perfect world that you hypothetically think about as philosophers or someone who's doing philosophy at
I
this
don't
moment,
know. In this
you don't know that you could be courageous.
perfect
Okay,
world-
I'll answer for you. No, you can't.
well,
Because courage requires fear.
courage
won't
isn't
be-
anything special. In this perfect
it
world,
isn't.
people can be happy with
So
that.
I should be a coward.
No.
Is that what we? Let's all become cowards.
No.
Let's not
I'm
look
talking
to the
about a world-
fireman that walks into the burning building, or the doctor who was working COVID when there was an opportunity for them to die, and they stepped into the surgery room and they could easily have died. And we looked at them, we were clapping them because they were courageous. Courage is seen as a great making attribute. So actually, I think you're incorrect in saying that. Courage is something which is a good thing. Cowardice is not something which is seen as a virtue. What about compassion? Can you have compassion in the world where it's perfect?
I'm talking about a perfect world where actually God could have created any world. So God could create a world where you don't need courage because there is no COVID.
But I didn't ask that question.
That's the question I'm asking. I'm talking about a perfect world. So I'm asking the question, why did God choose to create a world with suffering when God didn't need to?
Okay, so I'll repeat my answer to you. It's an opportunity that God has given us to be co-creators with him. So instead of having a world where we are just dormant, because think about the person who inherits wealth. We look to that person who inherits £1 billion and say, great, that's good. You can do loads of things. Great. I'm happy for you. But we look at another person who's been able to earn that £1 billion through struggle a little bit differently. We seem to think that the way that they've gained that money is more intrinsically valuable. So I'll give you an example. So you win a car, okay? Well, actually, let's change that. Sorry. So you're working very hard and you see a car and you look at it and you say, that car's beautiful. I really want it. I'm going to spend the next 20 years working for it. So you work for it and you get the car. And then you drive in, you're smiling, you're playing the music, you drive in into your driveway. And then you see the exact car in your driveway, an exact duplicate of it. And you run in and you say to your wife, why is this car here? You say, oh, you just won it in a lottery. Now, your wife will say to you, and you'll say, well, I don't really need 2 cars. So I'll ask you this question, which one would you sell?
Sorry, I really don't think this is a very...
Can you answer questions or it's not possible to answer?
It actually doesn't matter which one you sell. They're both of equal
But I'm
value.
asking you, which one would you sell?
Sorry, I don't have a car. I flip a coin. I don't know what this has to do with...
Okay, I'll answer for you because you're not willing to answer the question. So normally people will say...
I don't understand the question.
Yeah, okay, then I'll answer it for you. So normally people will say that there's more intrinsic worth to the one that you worked for. So you'll be more struggling to depart with the one that you worked for, even though materially they are identical. Because one seems to have intrinsic value that has a great intrinsic value because of the effort, the struggle you went to get the car. So normally people will say that, maybe you might not, but normally people say, I'm not going to flip a coin, I'm actually going to depart with that one. And so the reason I'm saying this is because the goodness that we have, the goodness that we get through struggle is a lot different intrinsically or extrinsically valuable than the goodness that we have that's just given to us. But also the second thing that I was trying to say to you is that there are many goods that cannot be had in your fictitious perfect world. Because in your perfect world, which you didn't answer to me, there wouldn't be courage, there wouldn't be compassion, there wouldn't be patience, there wouldn't be empathy, there wouldn't be sympathy. All of these things that we see as virtuous characteristics and their opposites to be vices, there wouldn't be had in that perfect world. So I ask you this question, why is that a perfect world when they lack all of these goods?
Well, I'll answer it. They would all be there because a perfect God, your perfect God, not my perfect God, because I don't believe in this perfect world. I believe in this real world where there is suffering. And there are good reasons why we know why there are earthquakes. We know why there are tsunamis. We know why people die. We know all of those things. We don't need a God to explain that. And we can construct societies which enable us to become as good people as possible through those things and through that suffering without having to invoke a God. Now, this perfect God, I'm buying into your perfect God who's omniscient, could create a world where there was compassion and there was sympathy and there was bravery, but there was no suffering. This perfect God can do whatever they want. We've been told that already. So it's a failure of imagination that you can't do those things. But I think that is clearly, so all I'm saying is, asking the question is, why didn't this perfect God do that? This whole answer about, suffering is really good for you, seems to me not a very good answer. Because, and I'm not saying there shouldn't be suffering. Of course there shouldn't be suffering, but we have to accept there is. And it's part of the natural world that we live in that's governed by physics, by biology, by the fact that we have to eat, by the fact that we are good some of the time and we're bad some of the time. We have the ability to be great, we have the ability to be evil, and we can construct societies which help push us one way or the other. Those are the things we should be thinking about and worrying about, not whether some bizarre idea about the experience of suffering and treating people as means not end is a quality of a perfect God.
Can I just?
Well, I just need to
Yeah,
tell people this is the best schools debate we've ever had. Okay, I want you to know that this is like Vecna versus 11 at the end. It is. It really is. Yeah, you can decide who's Vecna based on who you agree with. All right. We've only got 5 minutes left of discussion, and then we're going to have a couple of questions from you guys. But this is wonderful. Please.
Yeah. So, with all due respect, I feel like you're debating against yourself. I've got to be really honest, because there's many things that you said that I said that I never said. I never said that God can do anything. Normally, in philosophy and religion, I said God was omnipotent. Omnipotence is normally defined as the ability to do anything logically possible or metaphysically possible. Now, it's not, for example, logically possible to make a squared circle. So it's not limiting God to say that God cannot bring about a squared circle, because it's a logical impossibility. It doesn't even make sense. Now, you're saying, and I need to really understand this correctly, you're saying that you can have compassion, you can have sympathy, you can have courage in a world where there is no suffering, when by definition, in the definition of those virtues, includes suffering. Because normally you're sympathetic to someone who's going through suffering. How can I be sympathetic to someone who's not going through suffering? How can I be compassionate towards someone who, again, is not going through suffering? How can I be courageous when there is nothing to fear? If I'm Superman, I'm not having to be courageous because I just have the ability to do anything. So I'm not having to worry that, I might lose my life. Courage is normally seen as something where you step above the fear. In the face of fear, you still do the right thing, or you do the thing that you're supposed to do. So actually, I think you're not understanding this correctly. God can do anything logically possible. It's logically necessitated that suffering must exist in order for various virtues to exist as well. This is literally like, I've got to be honest, it's philosophy of religion 101. It's like everyone agrees with this. It's then going further to say, actually, are these virtues or not? But no one is arguing, as you've been arguing, that you can have a world where there is no suffering at all, but you can have all of these second order goods like compassion, empathy, sympathy, and all these things. So I actually think it's incorrect what you're saying, and you need to more, I would say, engage with what I've been saying. Because I do. Can I finish?
You've only just defined your terms.
You've been interrupting me quite a bit. Can I finish? So what I'm trying to say to you is that God has created a world in which we can be co-creators with him axiologically. So we play a role in grounding the morality of our world, the goodness of our world. And through your lived experience, you have the opportunity to actually change the world through the way you live, through your goodness. And unfortunately, many people through their badness have changed the world. But suffering is necessary in order for us to be able to go through that transformative process to become exemplars. Last thing, with the means to an end, in the Theodicy as well, which I didn't speak about more, God compensates through an eternal relationship with all those who have gone through the suffering, but one able to transform into exemplars. And that's something we can speak about another time. But yeah, I don't think you've shown the exemplarist Theodicy to be incorrect, because I just feel your critiques have been based on misunderstanding.
We'll give Julius the final word, and then we'll have a couple of questions.
Thank you for redefining your terms. I didn't misunderstand. I bought into your terms, which is the classical standard use of omniscience, and perfectly good. That's what I've been saying. You've redefined those, that we now have a limited God who can only do certain things and therefore cannot prevent a world without suffering. All that being said, we have a world where there's suffering. The arguments that I see them for why God allows that are an extraordinary sort of special pleading. Okay, God can't, I'm not sure whether the argument here is that God is deliberately putting suffering into the world because it has a good, or is it that God is weak and therefore can't prevent suffering being in the world and therefore sort of tries to make the best of it. This becomes so tortuous. We're turtles all the way down here, aren't we? It's dancing on the head of a pin. Much simpler just to say, why do we need God in there at all? We know why they're suffering. We know why lions go out and eat and hurt deer. We know why there are tsunamis, and unfortunately people suffer. We know why young children get leukemia and suffer, and we can try and construct societies which support people and enable people to become better because of it. That's got nothing to do with God. That's got to do with us, with people, with humanity. We don't need God to explain this. Therefore, I don't see the rationality in introducing this unnecessary complication.
You've both spoken incredibly well. I am very impressed. Let's have a couple of questions. So if you've got a question, I suspect some of you have got questions. Raise your hand and say the question. I will repeat it back to the camera. We don't have any Josh merchandise, so don't ask about that. Okay, so question about the problem of evil. It's only a problem, of course, once you posit the idea of a God. If there is no God, then there isn't really evil. There is just stuff that happens. So we don't have huge amounts of time, Josh, but what evidence is there for the existence of any God?
Yeah. So I would say that, similar to what you were saying at the beginning, we need to look at what's the best explanation of certain data that we're looking at. And I would say that there are at least, and I would argue in my own work, that there's at least 6 data points that you can put forward. But 3 of them will be focused. One will be on cosmological data, second on teleological data, and a third one on psychological data. What I mean by the cosmological data, what I'm specifically looking at, which is different from Aquinas and others that people have looked at, is the idea that our world is hierarchically ordered or arranged in ways of increasing complexity. So we have atoms, we have molecules, we have galaxies, we have humans, we have other biological organisms. We have all of these things that are existing, but they are all hierarchically ordered in a way of dependence. So my question would be, why is there this structure of hierarchical ordering in a way that says increasing complexity? Now, my idea would be that there must be a fundamental entity who's able to bring about this sort of dependent structure that we look at and that we see within reality, and that would be God. When it comes to the teleological data, again, it's not to do with fine-tuning. I take this a little bit differently, but it's the idea that we have this unity and general structure of the natural laws, that anywhere that you go within reality, the laws are still operative in the way that they are. And they are also mathematically elegant. Why do we have the laws operating this unified in a way that seems to have inherent purpose? I would say, again, it's because God is the being who has the power and the knowledge and the goodness to bring this about. And then when it comes to the psychological data, this is the idea that we have conscious beings that exist, all of us in this room, and we have irreducibly subjective, qualitative, first-person experiences. You cannot reduce our consciousness to our bodies. And so the idea here is that where did this come from? Why do we have this? And I would say that the best explanation for this is the existence of God. Now, obviously, this is very rushed, but I sort of take it in my own work, if anyone's ever interested, is I try and sort of update a lot of the arguments that people have looked at with the cosmological, teleological, and sort of consciousness stuff, and that's sort of the way that I'll take it.
Julius, yeah.
So both the cosmological and teleological, these are basically updating of William Paley's argument. William Paley basically said, oh, look, there's a watch, there must be a watchmaker. You know, there's an animal, there must be a maker. We now know the animals derive from evolution.
That is definitely not what I've said.
So, well, it's not dating it. So
you're saying this against yourself again.
Wait, let me continue, please.
Sorry.
You're saying it's hierarchically ordered. Well, it's hierarchically ordered because of physics. You know, physics will hierarchically order. 2, it's hierarchically ordered because we see things hierarchically. We're designed to see and seek hierarchies. So there's good physics to understand why the world is hierarchically ordered. There's good psychology to understand why we see the world hierarchically ordered. The idea that it's elegant is actually Paley's argument. In terms of the question of consciousness is a really interesting question. What is consciousness? Where does it come from? We know, for example, from Benjamin Libet's experiments, that much of what we experience is retrofitted, that we experience consciousness after the event. And consciousness probably evolved. Actually, there's good evidence that primates have certainly quite a lot of degrees of consciousness. So consciousness is an evolved epiphenomenon. And the fact I don't have an answer for these things doesn't worry me. I don't have to call this answer God. I just think that's a really interesting question. Let's go out there and seek a better explanation. God is not it doesn't actually explain any of this, really. It just kicks the can down the road.
That's all we've got time for on Unbelievable. Thank you to my guests, Julius Weinberg and Joshua Sijuwade. It's been a fantastic sword battle, and we hope that you'll join us again for more fighting here on Unbelievable.